time. And now that it is being recorded, I can begin. So today we're going to hear about the Bruin Resource Center and what it does and how it helps our students. One of the adverse outcomes from the pandemic has been increased food and housing concerns for many. And one of the overlooked communities affected by these issues is students. A recent UCLA study found that 5% of University of California and 20% of California community college students are experiencing homelessness. Other studies showed that food insecurity affects 1/4 to 1/2 of United States college students, and that's before the pandemic hit. Today, we will receive an update by campus experts from the UCLA Bruin Resource Center on how these problems have been affecting students, particularly at UCLA, and what has been and continues to be done to address these difficult situations. The UCLA Bruin Resource Center supports students' development, well-being, and academic success. It fosters an inclusive and socially justice campus community through many different programs for targeted populations. They include the Bruin Guardian Scholars, the Bruin Guardian Scholars Academy, the Bruin Mckinney-Vento Initiative, the Bruin Underground Scholars Program, Collegiate Recovery Program, Intergroup Dialogue Program, Students with Dependents, Undocumented Students Program. So today we are fortunate to have two staff members from the Bruin Resource Center, Brianna Harvey and Jessica Rivera. Do I see them? Good, yeah. Brianna is the Assistant Director for the Bruin Resource Center and the Program Director for the Bruin Guardian Scholars. She is a PhD candidate at UCLA in the School of Education, Urban Schooling Division. Her research focuses on the educational experiences of foster youth. She has worked in the field of social work for over 10 years. And Jessica Rivera, Program Manager of UCLA Guardian Scholars and the McKinney-Vento Homeless Student Initiative, has been working in the Bruin Resource Center with Brianna. She earned her bachelor's in social work from Cal State LA, a master's degree in social work from USC, and she is a licensed clinical social worker. We have time allotted after the presentation for questions, so please submit them using the chat function on the bottom of the screen. They'll be reviewed and consolidated by Melissa, and I will pose them to our presenters. And now, Brianna and Jessica, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. We're so excited to be here and just to have the opportunity to speak with you all. So we will go ahead and jump right in because we have a lot of information to share and we want to get to the discussion portion of the presentation. Next slide. So we're going to start off with just an agenda to kind of give you the layout of some of our discussion today. And so we'll start off with introductions so you can get to know a little bit more about myself and Jessica. Then we're going to talk specifically about the Bruin Resource Center and the different communities that we support through our programs. We'll also discuss student needs and challenges, not only for Bruin Resource students, but also for students across and in different UCLA communities. Lastly, we're going to talk about some of the different UCLA resources and how UCLA is responding to some of the needs and challenges of our students. And then we'll talk a little bit about areas for growth and continued support, and then open it up for questions and discussion. Next slide. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Brianna Harvey. I am the Program Director for Bruin Guardian Scholars Program, which works with our current and former foster youth. But I am also the Assistant Director of the Bruin Resource Center. So I have the wonderful opportunity to be able to work with all of our many different communities that we serve. I myself am also a social worker. I've worked in the field of social work for over 10 years and have worked in many different settings from, providing counseling for individuals that are experiencing homelessness homelessness on Skid Row, to working with our current and former foster youth through DCFS. And so all of those experiences, I think, are really what has brought me to this current time and within this role. So I've now been at UCLA for 5 years. And as they mentioned, I'm also a PhD student. And so somewhere within all of the free time that I have, I'm also working on research that works specifically to explore the educational experiences of foster youth, and as well as looking at the intersectional analysis of their experiences based off of race and sexual identity.
So thank you for the introduction earlier. Again, my name is Jessica Rivera. I am the program manager for the Guardian Scholars and Mckinney-Vento Initiative. As mentioned, I've been with UCLA for 3 years. My previous work was working with children and families who've been impacted by the child welfare system, also supporting folks who were interested in the foster to adopt process. My current function now is supporting students doing the direct service, offering case management services, really meeting with the students to create an individual plan that is going to address any challenges, their strengths, to ensure that they feel comfortable and confident in navigating UCLA and even beyond that in their personal and professional careers. So I thank you again for allowing us to be in this space to learn about how we continue to support the UCLA community. Next slide, please.
So we'll start first by talking about the Bruin Resource Center as a whole. And so the UCLA Bruin Resource Center has actually been around now for 11 years. And we were really built out of student advocacy. We had a group of students that really felt like there was more that needed to be done to be able to meet their needs. Our foster youth students were actually one of the ones that met that charge and really pushed our administration to form the BRC in order to meet some of the extensive needs that our community had. And so since then, we have grown significantly. And so we now have programs that support not only foster youth, but now our McKinney-Vento houseless students, our high school foster youth, our students with dependents that are caregivers or guardians, our undocumented students, our students in recovery, as well as our students that have been systems impacted, as well as lastly, our dialogue program. And so we're going to talk about those a little bit more in depth. We won't spend too much time on it, but we do want to give you just a little bit of a snippet of some of the resources that we offer. Next slide.
So UCLA doesn't only support college students, but they support the high school to college pipeline for our high school foster youth. And this is through our Guardian Scholars Academy. It's in partnership with First Star, which is a college access program, and the Department of Children and Family Services. It's a really neat program that invites high school foster youth to get the college experience through our 4-week residential program that happens in the summer. And so students are able to live in the dorms, eat at the dining hall, engage with students who are in college. It's really neat. They engage in workshops around SAT prep, college statements, social emotional skill building. And what's also neat is that our current and former foster youth who are attending UCLA can also be coaches. And so it provides employment opportunities for the students. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we've had to transition to a virtual platform for students. And so we're trying to be creative in continuing to engage students in seeking higher education. Next slide, please.
So then we, of course, have our Bruin Guardian Scholars Program, which is for our current and former foster youth that are currently attending UCLA. So we have over 200 students that we're serving within our program. We are very lucky in that within our program, we not only serve undergraduate students, but we also serve graduate students. And so this year, we have about 25 graduate foster youth students that are engaged in disciplines across the campus. And so we have students that are working on their MBA, students that are working on their JD, to students that are in education, and a lot that are in social services. And so we're just really lucky to be able to have the opportunity to serve those students. And so through the Bruin Guardian Scholars Program, we are able to provide support by way of case management, referrals to not only campus supports, but community supports. Another huge thing is our year-round access to housing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. But our students are granted guaranteed guaranteed year-round housing as long as they're in attendance at UCLA. We also grant them priority enrollment so that they're able to ensure that they get their classes in a timely manner so that we can hopefully get them to matriculate. We also offer different workshops and just a space of community and support for our students. Because the foster youth population is so small in comparison to the larger in comparison to the larger UCLA community, it's important that they have that space to really gain support from others that may have had similar life experiences. And then lastly, we have mental health supports that we offer through not only our case management, but we recently were able to bring on, through a grant, a part-time psychologist who's able to provide real intensive therapeutic services for our students. And then we also have academic and tutoring resources. Next slide.
So I'm really excited to share our new initiative that has been adopted into the Bruin Resource Center last spring, which is our Mckinney-Vento Initiative. And so we serve students who have experienced homelessness, houselessness, either in high school or 2 years within post-secondary education. So we serve undergrad and grad students. Right now we are in its infancy stage, trying to build up our programming. We serve 32 students who are eligible under the McKinney-Vento Act. But right now we are, again, trying to raise visibility on campus and awareness. And so we understand that the need is much greater than the 32 students who are participating in our initiative programming. We provide resources similar to the Guardian Scholars, so case management services, access to year-round housing, access to basic needs resources, priority enrollment, community building. That's where we're really at right now, is trying to really build our community, have focus groups to meet with students on a more intimate level to help understand what are the challenges that you are experiencing. How has experiencing homelessness impacted you? How is it impacting your education? We noticed from these focus groups that students are sharing financial stressors. And right now, because again, we are barely starting out, we are trying to create a budget. We are operating under Guardian Scholars that has a very generous budget, but we are trying to create our own because students are saying, hey, I need more funding for housing. I need more funding for food security. And so that's where we are currently at, but we are hopeful that we will continue to spread the word about this initiative and expand to a permanent program. Thank you. Next slide.
So then we have our Students with Dependence program, which is really a program that is to provide support for students that are not only parents, but those that are also guardians and or caregivers. So for example, we have a lot of students within our foster youth program that actually are taking care of their siblings now. And so they are able to be a part of the Students with Dependence program and are able to also participate in Guardian Scholars. And so through Students with Dependence, we're able to provide case management support, mental health and wellness support, and also really help them navigate some of the different systems that they have to deal with as they're trying to get CalFresh or deal with GAIN and Medi-Cal and all of those different kind of very confusing systems that students often have to address. This program serves both undergrads as well as graduate students. They were also a part of leading the charge to have lactation stations put on campus, have assisted in doing lactation education. We offer many different community building activities for our parents, as well as offering different individual academic and personal supports. Next slide.
Next, we have our undocumented student program, which is known as USP. And so again, similar to the previous programs you heard, they offer community support, social events, case management resources, academic supports. But I do want to highlight a unique thing about the program is that they offer on-site immigration legal services for students and their families. And so the immigration legal services facilitates workshops around the current immigration laws and policies. And they're also infamous for their Know Your Rights training. And last but not least, they have an amazing student group known as IDEAS, which stands for Improving Dreams, Equality, Access, and Success. And so they're really all about giving a face and a name and a voice to the issues of immigrant youth on campus and in the community. Thank you. Next slide.
So then we have our Collegiate Recovery Program, which is specifically for students that they themselves may be in recovery from substance use or other addictive behaviors and disorders, or that have family members or friends that are. And so this has really been a great space of community for students that may struggle with some of these challenges. They're able to, host events such as a sober happy hour and sober tailgating. And they're also able to really advocate on campus a lot for things such as having a sober floor on campus at UCLA, because we know that oftentimes alcohol use and drug use and things like that can be glorified when you're in your college years. And so having the Collegiate Recovery Program is really important, because we're able to provide those spaces to be able to talk about some of these issues and better provide a perspective of what it can do and what can happen when these substance use disorders expand and are really kind of get into a space where they're out of control. We also provide many different skill building and wellness workshops, as well as other forms of case management and support. Next slide.
Okay. Next, we have our Bruin Underground Scholars, which is known as BUS, and they serve students who have been formerly incarcerated or systems impacted. So they may have or know someone who have had those experiences, and yet they've been impacted by it. And so they offer students a safe space to build community, skill building and wellness workshops, individual, academic, and personal support, employment opportunities. And what's cool about this program is that they started off as an initiative 2 years ago, and they've developed into a stable program for students. They do a lot of social justice and advocacy work on campus and off campus. They partner with community organizations such as Homeboy Industries. They've just done a lot of amazing work on campus, and they're very proactive in helping other universities, community colleges establish a program such as this to encourage students who have similar experiences to seek higher education. Thank you. Next slide.
And then lastly, but not least, we have our Intergroup Dialogue Program. And so this program is really a space to create conversations across difference. And so through our IGD program, we're able to host different dialogues to address not only campus climate issues, but some of the many different conflicts and issues that are happening in our world today. And so students were able to get together and to have these dialogues. When we were in person, they would actually host them on campus, and we hired like IGD peer leaders that would actually go and engage in some of these different conversations. Of course, due to COVID, everything has become virtual. And so this program has just been really influential into helping to kind of talk about some of those things that are a little bit more challenging to discuss on campus, and to really kind of find a way to meet in the middle when discussing some of these challenges. Next slide.
So those are all of the amazing resources that UCLA is able to offer our students. But with that being said, we're still recognizing that there are still more student needs and challenges that our students are facing, and that have been exacerbated through the political climate that we're in and COVID-19. And so I'm going to go over a comprehensive list, but we are going to go more in depth in the later slides to come. So the first is we're seeing a lot of racial injustice and equity issues that have been going on historically for our students of color. But this really came to surface this past summer when we saw the unfortunate death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Students were using their best activist skills. They were protesting on campus. They're really calling out the support from the UCLA community to really address anti-racist and anti-Blackness. Students are facing housing insecurity. The cost of housing has gone up, and unfortunately with loss of wages, loss of jobs, it's been difficult for students to sustain themselves and their families. And so they are seeking out more support to to be able to secure housing. Food security, many of our students share that they've experienced food insecurity due to the loss of jobs. Some of our students with dependents have shared that they had relied on their students' school to provide, those breakfast meals, those lunch meals. But now that, their children are home, they're having to figure out and come up with ways of how they're going to put food on the table. financial resources. We've noticed a demand in scholarship requests to be able to help with some of the costs for technology, support hotspots, basic needs, again, for food and housing costs. Employment opportunities. Some of our students, well, actually, a lot of our students have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. It has been difficult for them to be able to find remote work, find work study jobs. And then lack of community. Many students have shared that it's been difficult to find a sense of community through the virtual platform. Students are not able to go to campus to build those relationships with their peers, the staff, their faculty, which is creating a lot of mental health challenges or a sense of isolation, withdrawal. Some of our students have expressed feeling depressed, then leading to a high demand of mental health referrals. And then virtual learning challenges, going from in-person to remote quick has been a challenge to adapt for some of our students. Some of our students express not having that proper equipment to be able to complete their assignments, to be able to log in on Zoom for their classes, or stable Wi-Fi. Some students share they're not as tech savvy as expected to be. I just came across a student that shared they just purchased a new computer, but they were terrified to open it because they didn't know how to navigate it, or they didn't know who they could reach out to seek support to be able to get assistance. Students have had trouble or expressed trouble with finding a home work-life balance. They may be in spaces where they're amongst other folks who are also working from home. So having trouble finding that safe and quiet space to really focus has been difficult. And then for some of our other students who have their own children or caregiving for others, it's been hard to find childcare for the children. Trying to juggle those multiple roles, a parent, a student, and all of that, and helping their own child, adapt to virtual platform has been challenging. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jessica. So as you can see, there is a lot of needs that our students are experiencing. And so we want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that UCLA is addressing and trying to meet some of those needs. I would like to caveat that this is literally just a drop in the bucket, that oftentimes many of the needs are exceeding that of what even UCLA is currently providing, and that this is also not a comprehensive list of all of the many different initiatives and programs and things that are working to address some of these issues. So I'll start by talking a little bit about some of the racial justice and equity issues. And this is something that has honestly been around for generations, since the very beginning of UCLA. And this is something where our students have constantly really been advocating for change and advocating for large-scale systemic change. And so I think it's, all of the different things that have happened over the summer, it's turned into kind of a perfect storm where finally our students' voices have been able to slowly start to be heard. There's still so much more progress that needs to be made, but I think UCLA is very open to really starting to address some of those things. And so one of the first things we saw is that when the death of George Floyd happened, many departments issued solidarity statements. And though some, that was kind of all it turned out to be, there was many other departments that really kind of put their words and their actions behind their words. And from there have been many departments that have addressed some of their student concerns, student groups that created demands, and departments that actually responded and have been implementing some of these student demands. And so I think that it started with something small like a solidarity statement, but really I think a lot of departments are starting to show how they are really committed to anti-racist work, as well as addressing anti-Blackness. There's been a lot of trainings and dialogues and discussions that have been happening throughout campus to talk about these issues, to create those safe spaces, not only for students, but also for faculty and staff. We recently had the development of the Black Bruin Resource Center, which is something that has been a long time coming. We're really excited to be able to have the Black Bruin Resource Center as a partner and a place for Black students to be able to access those resources and really to be able to have a safe space to create community. UCLA is also really focusing on ensuring that they are doing work with social justice throughout all levels of their curriculum. And so I recently saw that they actually received a large grant, and they will be engaging and ensuring that most of our curriculum, I'm sorry, not most, but that all of our curriculum is in some way addressing social justice and discussing some of these issues that we're seeing. And then lastly, we recently just hired a new vice chancellor for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so I know that Anna Spain Bradley is really working to try to not only meet the needs of our students, but to really understand how staff and faculty also are needing to be supported during this time. Next slide.
As mentioned, there's been a great need in terms of students requesting more scholarships or accessibility to scholarships. And so UCLA has provided scholarships for technology grants. And so it's granting students to be able to purchase a new computer, to be able to purchase those hotspots or whatever necessities needed to be successful in transitioning to online learning. The Bruin Resource Center has been proactive in offering need-based scholarships for students. And it's open to the community. Each BRC program, as mentioned, operates on different budgets. And so they offer a variety of scholarships. And again, the funding really varies on the program's budget, but these scholarships can go towards basic living necessities, medical expenses, or towards anything that is going to help mitigate any challenges a student's experiencing. We do encourage students to access the Scholarship Resource Center to see what is accessible to them. We've noticed that there's been a large demand in seeking out monetary support from the center. Then there's the Economic Crisis Response Team, which is an interdisciplinary team that consists of many people from different departments, such as financial aid, housing, student accounts, case managers from the different departments, staff from the Bruin Resource Center. And so they come together to support students who may be in a financial crisis, and they offer need-based grants. Then there's the CARES Act funding, which is federal funding that's been designated to universities to help support with the impact of COVID on students. And again, students are encouraged to tap into community organizations that offer financial support. We at UCLA do not work alone, we work as a team. And so we're hoping, we can all come together to help students leverage resources to support with basic needs.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Oh, and so then we have our housing resources. So as I mentioned, we're very lucky in that UCLA has always made sure that they really looked out for not only our foster youth students, but our students experiencing houselessness. And so currently our Bruin Guardian Scholars, as well as our McKinney-Vento Initiative scholars, are all able to access year-round guaranteed housing, even in the midst of COVID. So where many universities unfortunately sent students home or left them without housing options, UCLA has been really great about ensuring that our students are able to access housing. So students that may be facing familial challenges, our international students who many of them were not able to return home to their home country, all of these students were able to access guaranteed housing in the midst of the pandemic. So currently in our foster youth support program, Bruin Guardian Scholars, we have over 172 students that are actually living in UCLA housing, which is huge because, we're very, like I said, lucky that we have this ability. So we have students that are living not only in our family housing, but students that are living in apartments, as well as those that are also in the dorms. So throughout housing, we work very closely with other departments such as CAE, as well as CAPS, to make sure that students are having their mental health needs met, and that if there are any physical or mental accommodations that are needed, like let's say a student needs a single, prior to COVID, that was something that was very difficult to come by. And so they would always ensure that, they were able to get that. Now, all of our students have singles, which I think has been kind of a gift and a curse. I think it's wonderful that our students are able to have this space, but many students have said that they feel very isolated due to being alone and having, this huge dorm room or apartment by themselves. UCLA also offers short-term emergency housing. And so for many students that may send referrals to the economic crisis response team because they're dealing with some sort of financial crisis, UCLA has been able to put them into short-term emergency housing. And for many of them, that may transition to them actually just staying permanently on UCLA. Others may, stay for the short-term housing and then end up transferring out to some other housing opportunities, such as the collaborations we listed below. We're very fortunate that we've been able to build these partnerships with different community members, such as Bruin Shelter, which was student-led and initiated. Trojan Shelter followed after the UCLA Bruin Shelter. And then we also have our Opportunity House, which was recently just put adjacent to campus. They took over a 50-bed sorority house. And so it has been an awesome opportunity to offer like a subsidized, cheaper cost housing for students that are living within the LA area. And so it's been very helpful for many of our foster youth students and our McKinney-Vento students that, may not be able to afford the cost of living on campus, especially with this significant increase that we have recently experienced. Most students received an increase of about $2,000 in the cost of their housing. And though, they were offered loans to pay this, many students were not offered grants. And so I know for our foster youth students, taking on loans can be very scary, as well as challenging, because many of them are unsure if they'll have the ability to pay it back. Next slide.
So to address sorry, my dogs are barking. But to address food security at UCLA, there's been a designated department to support students with basic needs. And so it's the Community Programs Office. Here it says partnership. Sorry, that's an error on the slide, but they're responsible again for assisting students with basic need resources. And so I'm going to just share some of the resources that they offer through their basic needs. And so prior to COVID, they had a food closet, and it was filled almost every hour, Monday through Friday, and students were able to go and to pack groceries. Unfortunately, with COVID, we've had to close down the food closet, but CPO, they've been very intentional in terms of offering student virtual gift cards for students. And so they give them out every so often throughout the quarters. It's been very helpful. Students have shared in terms of just being able to buy groceries with these gift cards or basic hygiene projects if needed. They also support with holiday gift boxes. And so they do an amazing event throughout Thanksgiving where they give turkey boxes, canned foods, desserts. This year, they made sure that every student received one, and the staff were amazing as they drove and they personally delivered them to the students and their families, and it just really warmed students' hearts to know that staff were still thinking about them during these times. They also facilitate quarterly meetings with on and off campus partners. They're very intentional in communicating like what are the common needs that we are seeing from students, what are some of the barriers that students are facing right now, and how do we continue to enhance student services. There's also the meal voucher program, which are kind of like food coupons that students who have exhausted all financial resources but yet are still facing food security can utilize these coupons at the dining hall. There's referrals to CalFresh drop-in hours. So staff, faculty, peers can refer students to seek CalFresh through these drop-in hours where students could be given up to $192 worth of money to use towards groceries. Prior to COVID, the Guardian Scholars and Mckinney-Vento Initiative had a food closet where students were able to come in, grab snacks. It was also a way for staff to check in with students and to see how they were doing. But because of COVID, again, we had to close that down. But the Guardian Scholars does offer virtual gift cards as well. There's also the 580 Cafe, which is an amazing resource located near campus, and they provide students with warm meals as well as even additional grant funding that students can use towards basic needs. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so employment and career opportunities. So career and employment have always been very important for our students to be able to have that engagement and professional development. But I think since COVID and pandemic, we've realized how significant it is that our students need the support and need access to jobs and employment. And so our Career Center has been doing an amazing job at really engaging virtually and hosting career workshops and Instagram lives, and really trying to meet the students where they are, and using all of these digital media platforms. They have students who they hire to provide one-on-one peer counseling and support. They can help them with their resume and really help them just become familiar and break down some of those barriers, and I think fears that come with, like, oh my gosh, I don't have a resume, or how do I apply? How do I even look for jobs? And so I think they do an amazing job at really trying to kind of break down some of those barriers. They also have an amazing online platform known as Handshake that they use, which is similar to like Indeed, and has a lot of different job postings that students can access. One thing that I love is that UCLA has really tried to hire as many students as possible to do remote work. And so I know, especially within the BRC, all of our programs were able to maintain the employment of all of our student staff. Some programs even increased the amount of student staff that we had hired from the year previous, in order to, continue to provide those employment opportunities. And so many of our students are engaging in this remote work and able to work from home or their dorms or wherever they are, and still be able to get a salary and have money coming in. In particular, the Bruin Guardian Scholars Program recently, through grant funding, we're able to launch a new position. And so our BGS program coordinator really assists our students with professional development and career-related opportunities. And so our amazing program coordinator, Yennefer, is actually also an alumni of the Guardian Scholars Program. And so she herself was a UCLA foster youth student and is very familiar with accessing resources and some of the needs of the community. And so she develops weekly newsletters and sends them out to students in order to help them, access scholarship resources and job resources. She does one-on-one appointments. She does career workshops. But I would say one of the things I'm most proud of is we recently just launched a BGS externship program. And so through our externship program, we are basically providing funding for our students to be hired in other departments. And so we just launched it this year and are hopefully going to be expanding next year. But we have 2 students that are working in admissions and 2 BGS students that are currently working in Career Center. And so these 4 externship students are being paid out of our program, but are having, these different experiences within the departments that they're working. And so our hope is just to provide more access to jobs and employment. And so we're hoping to expand to other departments next year. Next slide.
A big part of UCLA is ensuring that students are feeling a sense of community. As mentioned, it's been very difficult for students to do that, especially like our incoming students who were looking forward to, being in person and building relationships with UCLA like-minded folks. And so UCLA has been very intentional and working with every department to ensure that they're still operating as normal as possible by facilitating their wellness, their workshops, like wellness related, academics, career related online, to give students that opportunity to make connections, to seek out employment, internship opportunities. And they've also been very intentional about highlighting the intersectionality identities of our students. Our students have unique experiences, come with rich experiences. And so we want to honor that and embrace that by still trying to operate as best as we can in a virtual world. We've transitioned all of our receptions and events online, including our True Bruin Welcome, which all new students or when students return to campus in the beginning of the academic year. It's a way to really engage the community. Our graduation ceremonies are also virtual, but we're trying to get as creative as we can. So students look forward to these type of events, because students do experience Zoom fatigue. It's real. And I'm sure that most folks do when they're having to sit behind a screen all day. So we're trying to just make it as creative and fun and welcoming as possible. We're also trying to meet students where they're at. Again, like Brianna mentioned, we are trying to get creative by promoting our events, connecting with students on Instagram, on Facebook, on GroupMe. So that's just like our way, again, of trying to provide that sense of community, that sense of belonging, and outreaching to students as best as we can. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so as I'm sure we all have experienced, mental health is something that has really been exacerbated in this pandemic. And so for many of our students, even those that may not have had prior mental health issues, the isolation and the feelings of being alone, as well as the loss, many of our students have experienced the loss of family members and friends. And it's just placed such a weight and I think a challenge that a lot of them are having to really navigate right now. And so we're very lucky in that our counseling and psychological services is virtual. And so they are doing individual appointments with students and they're able to meet with them on a as needed basis to really be able to provide the support that they need and provide a safe space for the students to communicate some of the different feelings that they're having. CAPS has been offering groups for students to have therapeutic spaces. They've done trainings and just all of these many different resources that they're providing to meet some of the mental health needs that our communities are experiencing. Within BRC, we're very lucky that we do have designated liaisons within CAPS that are individuals that have special knowledge or experience working with our particular communities. And then, as I previously mentioned, BGS does have a part-time psychologist that we work with who is trained and has spent most of her career working with foster youth students in trauma. And she's able to really help meet some of those very individual needs that our students face that are very much unlike that of other students. Within the BRC, we also hire graduate interns. So we have 3 Masters of Social Work interns, and these are social work students that are working and getting their clinical hours, and so they provide case management and support. We also have Masters of Student Affairs interns that help us with the function of many of our BRC programs. And then, of course, we have partnerships with our case management team, our care program, and just many of the other amazing resources on campus that have been created to meet some of the needs that our students are experiencing. Next slide. Okay, and so that was a lot. And so I would say to kind of like summarize and end, we just wanted to talk a little bit about the areas that we're really hoping to continue to grow and garner increased support. And so one of those is, of course, increased access to financial support. Though I think our department does a really good job at trying to provide scholarship opportunities for the students that we serve within our communities, those can always be expanded. I think that we've definitely seen a significant need increase for our students as they've had to navigate COVID, navigate joblessness, navigate the increase in the cost of housing. And so, increased access to financial scholarships is very important. So that way we can, remove some of those financial barriers that they're facing and give them the ability to have an even and level playing field to be able to really have their needs met.
And as Brianna mentioned, the cost of housing has increased, and it's caused a lot of significant stress for our students because, as it is, the housing in Westwood, in Los Angeles, California, it may not be sustainable for some. And on top of adding a pandemic, on top of that, with other barriers, has been a concern for some of our students, and it's created worries that students are going to be at risk for homelessness. And so it would be helpful to help, additional funding that can go towards housing. So this way students that can be the least of their worries and that they can focus on their academics. And another thing that we've come across or a challenge is like sometimes students do have to take a break from their academics to focus on their mental health. But a worry is always housing. How am I going to pay for housing if I do not get a refund and I'm not enrolled as a student right now? And so again, additional funding to go towards that outlet can be really helpful for our students. Next, mental health supports and resources. Again, the funding to go towards mental health can be expanded. As mentioned, the Guardian Scholars that serves current and former foster youth was given a grant to have a part-time psychologist who designates 10 hours of her time to the community. But the 10 hours doesn't allow her to reach and expand her services to all students who need mental health supports. And so allocating funding to go towards a full-time psychologist can be really helpful in ensuring that our students' wellness needs are being met, again, so that they can then focus on their academics.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so that was a whole lot of information, and I hope that we didn't overwhelm you too much, but we'd like to now open it up for questions and discussion.
The first question is about the housing. You said 172 were in student housing. Do you anticipate then when the campus reopens that there will be space for them? And does that take some negotiating with the residential hall administrators? Just wondering where that would be, or will they all be home?
Yeah. No. So like I said, we're very lucky that we have a close partnership with housing. And so even prior to COVID, our students were guaranteed housing throughout as long as they're at UCLA. So if it takes them 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, they are guaranteed to be housed throughout that time. And so our students, because of their priority status, regardless of how full housing is, they always ensure that they have space. And so from what I'm hearing, our housing is going to be, even once we return next year, will be at a limited capacity. And so there's not going to be as many students. I've heard there's not going to be any triples. It will more than likely just be singles and doubles that students are placed in. And so there will be more than enough spaces for them to be able to use.
Thank you. And I was wondering whether all of these, well, first of all, I'm assuming that there are some students whose problems overlap in a number of different areas of all the targeted programs that you have. Has there been any analysis to determine whether the dropout rate has been higher through this?
So that's actually really important. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think that our students that deal with some of these intersectional identities really face challenges that are very multi-layered. So on top of, like I said, all the other roles I hold, I also oversee assessment for the Bruin Resource Center. And so we're currently actually trying to engage in assessment projects that are looking at exactly those things to better determine what are the needs of our students, especially those that have overlapping identities. How are they doing academically? Are we noticing that they're struggling more significantly? We recently developed a platform that we're calling our Bruin Resource Center Data Exchange. And we can actually pull those numbers, and it's a collaboration between financial aid, admissions, the registrar, so that we can actually get some of that data and information, because we think that's very important that we're able to highlight some of these intersectional challenges that the students are experiencing.
Interesting. So what has surprised you about things that the students have not expressed concern about? Anything? No?
No. I was just thinking, I was going to say, Jess, do you want to take that one? And trying to think of things that students haven't really expressed. I don't know. I think our students communicate very well with us. So I think from the very beginning, since COVID happened, they've been in constant communication with us. And so if anything, I think I've just been pleasantly surprised by how our students adapt and have been able to adapt to this virtual platform and are continuing to excel and to do well. We had a student that was so happy he recently graduated a year early and maintained a 4.0. And we were just so proud of him that in the midst of all of this, that he maintained a 4.0 at UCLA as a foster youth student, and overcoming all of these challenges. And so I think I'm just always surprised by their resiliency and their ability to not only deal with some of these personal challenges, but also the larger wide scale ones like COVID.
I totally agree with what Brianna said. I meet with students who are sharing their concerns, and I'm like, okay, I hear what you're saying, but let me recognize and praise you for everything that you are enduring and how gracefully you are overcoming this. I think we need to recognize that and embrace those qualities of our students so that they can continue pushing forward, and but validating like, hey, right now is a sucky time. Like, who wouldn't be going through a difficult time, with all of these layers and maintaining the student status and participating in this and that. And so again, like, I feel very blessed to be in spaces with students who they're excelling through all of this. I can't imagine putting myself in their shoes.
Yeah.
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 Trained social work background that you both have.
It's come in handy right now, definitely.
I'm assuming the numbers of students that have come in have gone up in the last year. Where do you expect, when it goes down, that it will not go down? Homelessness or food security? Or
I think that those things are honestly going to continue to increase. I think that we have students that are just consistently struggling across multiple universities and campuses within this area. I mean, I know USC before COVID had designated a parking lot for students that needed to park that slept in their car, and gave them access to a bathroom and things like that, just because housing security has been such a challenge. And I know that that's something UCLA has also been talking about. So I unfortunately think that a lot of these things are going to continue. I think that also, as we see kind of some of the economic downfall that is going to come from COVID, I don't know that we're going to get all of the jobs back that maybe some of our students held previously. And so I think economics, financial crisis, all of these things are going to continue, which will further exacerbate systemic issues that were already there.
so another question that's come in is, if someone wants to contribute to the Bruin Resource Center, and you've certainly listed the needs and how it could be used well, can you then have the opportunity to choose which programs are the highest priority?
Yes. So, and I'm not sure if Willie is here. Our amazing development officer is in the room, so he can probably speak to this even more. But we do have a donation page, and so individuals can select which program they would like to put funding towards. And we also accept specialized donations. So, for example, we had the Black Women Lawyers Association actually donated funding specifically for Black women, Black students that want to become lawyers. And so if someone maybe wants to create a specialized fund that they want to create for students to access within a particular, experience, identity, genre, they can do that as well.
Like GoFundMe. That's wonderful to have all those choices. Are there any other questions? I know Melissa's asked for some. If you want to know more about Bruin Resource Center, if you contact Melissa, she'll send you the link. Here's another question for Maggie. Phillips. Oh, I got to post it up again. I didn't memorize it. Maggie Phillips. Do you track our graduates who've been served by your programs?
So some of our programs have actual designated alumni groups, and so they engage very continually with our alumni. I think with Bruin Guardian Scholars, we haven't yet created a large-scale alumni group, but for us, it's like once a Bruin Guardian Scholar, always a Bruin Guardian Scholar. And I think that feeling kind of extends across all BRC programs, is we often have our alumni students that come back. I would say with our virtual platform, we probably have seen more alumni engagement and alumni that have made appointments to meet with staff just to check in, especially those that recently graduated. So we maintain a lot of communication with our alum.
Kind of like a posse. Well, if there are no more questions, I'm going to say how much we've appreciated your presentation, and to learn the depth and hear the depth of the needs. And I saw Judith clapping her hand. If you want to go unmute and clap your hands, fine.
Thank you.
So I know it's been very comprehensive, and we really appreciate it. And also creating time in your own schedules. We all are still working from home. So thanks for the information, for sharing the update and how they're doing. And then I'm going to thank, besides Melissa and Betty, Dana Katz is asking if you can send the slide deck out. Can you provide that to us, and then she could send it out? Because we usually do a follow-up afterwards. Thanks,
Yeah,
Dana.
we definitely can.
Yeah, okay. And also to our development events team, Melissa Delgadillo and Stella Plateau. Their support and assistance makes this work a little better than it would have without them, that's for sure. We have other programs in the works throughout the calendar year, and we'll keep you posted. Thanks so very much for tuning in and staying with us. And thanks again, Brianna and Jessica.
Thank
Goodbye.
you. Bye.
Thank you.